like this. I need to just sort it out. It's way too wonky. Hello, welcome to Normal Ireland Live. It's so good to be here today. Obviously Mondays are with me, which is wonderful for you, maybe for some. But I'm joined with an incredible guest, Martin Abrams. Hi, how are you?
Hey Sarah, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you? How's your Monday been?
I'm all good. Yeah, it was a slightly different Monday. My kids are still on holiday. It was
Oh,
a
nice.
inset day at my kids' school. I don't begrudge the teachers an extra day off by any means, but they are ready to go back to school now after 2 weeks off.
Yeah, I think well, I am a teacher, so I was wanting a day off today, but I was like, oh, we're thrown right into it today.
Yeah,
But yeah, I bet a lot of parents were quite happy to see the back of their
well,
children in the nicest way possible.
inset days aren't days off anyway, are they? They're training days, but no,
Yeah,
it's all good. So yeah, I'm
no,
great.
true.
I'm absolutely thrilled to be on Turn Left today. Long time listener, first time caller, if you want
Oh
to
my goodness, this is
describe
your
it.
first. Oh,
Well,
I
no,
love this.
I think Curtis has interviewed me once before, but I've never been a
I thought
guest.
so.
So
Yeah.
this is very exciting, especially
Well,
with you.
I'm excited to get your insight. I'm really happy that I'm paired with you today. So, coming up on tonight's show, Farage attacks Low, and then we're going to go into Restore wanting to get rid of translation services. Our second story will be on the fact that Iran have literally said no to the US, surprise, surprise, when it comes to the US's peace talks. And then the last story will be the Democrats attacking Hassan Piker, calling him an anti-Semite. So lots to get into today, but as ever, you can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member for just 99p. On to our first story. I mean, is it a day with me if we're not speaking about Restore reform? But Nigel Farage, speaking from a private jet, has dismissed Restore Britain, but I don't think it's entirely inaccurate.
And the Low thing, it's one angry man saying stuff on the internet. Look, let him do what he wants. He doesn't marry me.
I mean, but is Nigel Farage wrong in that instance? Rupert Lowe does give the vibe that he is just an internet troll. An internet troll, though, who is super rich and has a lot of time on his hands. This is how Lowe responded. He's right. I am angry at how the rotten establishment politicians who now pack his party stuffed full have betrayed our country, but I'm certainly not alone. What I hope for on the sidelines that everyone sees Lowe for the grifter that he is, because it is true, and what he tends to seek out is a good soundbite that triggers a culture war online. But the irony of talking about the rotten establishment politicians when he is one himself, and when let's strip away the Twitter theatrics for a second, because Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe are both very, very much entrenched in the establishment. Both of them. Farage has spent years branding himself as this, the anti-elite outsider, just the outsider, just looking in. But weren't you the one who tried and failed to get into Parliament a number of times? Like, you don't fight the establishment from a private jet, Nigel, and you don't take money from wealthy donors. Sit at the centre of like media ecosystems and dominate airtime in the way that you do, and then pretend that you're some sort of like insurgent voice of the people. He is just a bit of an embarrassment. And then you've got Restore Britain, who want to position themselves as the real alternative in comparison to reform. They're kind of just like warring with each other at the moment, trying to say that they are the grassroots rebellion that the right need, and that Farage supposedly isn't. But you also don't fight the establishment, Low, from the private land that you'd never give up. But here's what Restore is standing for at the moment. Restore Britain says it will end all foreign language translation in the public sector, saving hundreds and hundreds of millions. If you live in our country, you speak our language. Sorry? And of course, all the individuals who migrated elsewhere from the UK, the ones they call expats, not immigrants, living in Benidorm or Spain, do they all speak fluent Spanish? Or those that crept off to Dubai to avoid tax, are they learning Arabic as we speak? It's so stupid. Like, are we forgetting that translation services aren't just for people who don't speak English? I mean, ever heard of the blind or visually impaired, Rupert? Translation services go into that. Have you forgotten about, the Welsh, maybe? In the health report conducted just after the pandemic, it stated, of the money spent, they found the vast majority went on interpretation services, which made up 84.8% of the total spend. 13% of spending went on British Sign Language interpreters. In contrast, only 2.2% of the total was spent on translated materials. It's literally minimal. In the 2021 census, it states, in 2021, 91.1%, 52.6 million of usual residents aged 3 years and over had English or Welsh in Wales as a main language, down from 92.3. Very, very minimal. In 2021, a further 7.1% of the overall population were proficient in English, but did not speak it as their main language. 91.1%, guys. English is their main language. And that 7.1% do speak English, but guess what? They are bilingual kings and queens who can speak another language. It's just that English isn't their main. So what's the issue here, and what money do you actually want to save? It is so utterly frustrating that these ridiculous dog whistles are given, but just say what you really want, Lo. You're as ever creating an us versus them narrative and telling people who you think should and shouldn't belong here. And at this point, it's getting a bit boring. And this is exactly why, and probably the only time I'll agree with Farage, that Lo is an angry man with zero substance, though. He's an internet troll and not even a good one. And what made me laugh even more about this is that Rupert Lowe proves the point that he only exists on the internet. Luke Tratters, Labour MP for York Outer, responded to this, saying, "So restore Britain, far-right clowns want to scrap public sector translation services. That policy is dangerous nonsense. Here are 5 examples why. Number 1, our military would be unable to translate NATO intelligence when it isn't in English. 2, A&E doctors would be guessing a tourist's allergies, for example, if they were going into an anaphylactic shock. 3, criminals would walk free because key witnesses such as visitors who see a major crime couldn't have their statements translated. 4, intelligence services would be unable to carry out foreign language work. And 5, border force would be severely weakened by an inability to conduct in-depth foreign language interviews. Impractical, dangerous, and dangerous discrimination." Rupert Lowe then responds and he says, "Good to see Labour attacking us too now. We really are making progress." I think if you have Labour criticising you, it doesn't really mean anything in terms of progress. Policies like scrapping translation services, posited as a way to save millions, I think is not about efficiency. They're just about who gets to belong, and that's Restore Britain's whole brand as well. Who belongs here and who doesn't. But it's interesting that translation services are kind of treated as a luxury add-on, when actually it's what's needed. It's pivotal to how people access healthcare and legal systems and education and just their basic rights. We have so many unaccompanied refugee children who are at schooling at the moment. They deserve to access education just like anyone else. But I could speak about this forever, but I do want to go to Martin. Martin, like, what do you make of all of this? In that video, it says that he's not worried about Lowe, but should Farage be worried about Rupert?
Well, I think he probably should, actually, and I think all of us probably should be. I think the problem with Nigel Farage and how the left treated Nigel Farage is that we didn't take him seriously for many years, and now he's leading a party that's ahead in the polls. I mean, I do want to take a moment just to point out how ridiculous man of the people Nigel Farage looks sitting on a private jet, and I assume he's not flying a private jet into Clacton. He's going off coming back from somewhere very nice, I am sure. But I think the fact that Restore Britain exist, probably could be argued to be a positive thing as well, because they are actually splitting the reform vote, and like rats fighting in a sack. The hard and far right kind of splitting off and going for each other. Has got to be welcomed by those of us on the left, because it will split their vote, and it will obviously take up their time and energy. But the last poll that I saw, Restore Britain were polling at 7%. So not earth-shattering figures, but not to be discounted either, because they are a brand new party, and they're obviously attracting some awful people, from ethno-nationalists to civic nationalists. I don't really think they know what they are as a party yet, apart from, as you said, Sarah, existing sort of terminally online and really dominating X. And I know Rupert Lowe got quite a lot of support from Elon Musk as well. So, I think the party should be taken seriously, and there needs to obviously be pushback when they come out with policies about scrapping things like vital translation services, because this is basic infrastructure for a multicultural working class, which is something that we should be celebrating in this country, not demonising. And that's gone on for far too long with reform, and now seemingly Restore Britain taking it that bit further.
Mm, really great point. And what I find like really interesting about Farage and Lowe, like Lowe not that long ago was part of Reform, but clearly wasn't, hitting the hitting the sides for him. So what is interesting is that I do think that they're not the opposite at all. They're exactly the same. They both point into that cultural direction of well, let's blame migrants instead of the actual elites and the billionaires. Like I don't really see them pointing in that sort of direction or calling out for taxes with the wealthy so that we can actually I don't know, just tax them in a way that's fair and like equitable. But they always talk about a decline without ever challenging like wealth hoarding or asset holding. Like properties are now becoming this asset class that they're not interrogating, which I think needs to be interrogated. And all these foreign investors who are taking these properties and then leaving them vacant. But I do find it concerning that at the moment they're just offering these culture wars instead of any sort of like material change. But what's really scary is that, like you said, that it does seem like it's online, but I welcome Restore's existence because I hope that it will eventually just split that vote on the right, and the people will be like, oh, like reform's not far right enough for us, so let's go even further right because the Overton window is shifting right. But I think my biggest worry is that the Overton window is just going to shift even more right, and then that rhetoric is going to be even more normalized. And we're seeing it with Labour and the push that they're doing in terms of migration, or in terms of, I think where they were trying to cut for those on disability benefits and like PIP and all this sort of stuff. Like there has been so many things that people have been going for because the Overton window shifted right. So I think my second question would be, at what point do policies that are framed as efficiency, like cutting translation services as efficiency, cross over into something more exclusionary and even authoritarian in some ways?
Yeah, that is that is the worry, and I think you're right about the Overton window because. Oh, sorry. I think that is absolutely right, Sarah. Because uh, I think Restore Britain are polling quite high for a new party, and uh, they've described Nigel Farage as a centrist, which is also terrifying, and that's why they've sort of peeled off to form this new, much harder right. Often some people describe them as far right party, and yeah, I think the counterweight, has to be parties like a party like the Green Party that is obviously polling much higher than Restore Britain, and coming up with a lot of progressive policies to push back against that. But typically, because of our media class, Restore Britain will get the publicity that they probably won't deserve. It happened with Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage has been on Question Time about 48 times. Knowing organisations like the BBC, they will offer Rupert Lowe and characters in Restore Britain way more media exposure than they should be getting, and I think that's something that should be called out and we should be pushing back against as much as possible.
Completely agree with you. And I think that's a great place to end on, because we should be pushing back on this utter ridiculousness that's happening at the moment. And I do hope that people venture away from calling themselves centrists, because there's just nothing to the center at the moment. I don't think you can be in the middle of like certain topics. I think translation services, as minute as it might be, is because not that many people use them, is something that people need to be able to have access to. Like they deserve access to that. It's something as simple as that. But second story, onto our second story. The Iran war is day 45, I believe. Peace talks have completely collapsed, and now the United States is threatening to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, warning that any ship attempting to enter or leave could be targeted. Donald Trump stated in a lengthy Truth Social post, he said the US is going to start blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. Trump said that the US Navy is going to start destroying the mines the Iranians laid in the straits, warning that any Iranian who fights the US or at peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas. adding that the blockade, which will involve so far unspecified other countries, will begin shortly. Iran will not be allowed to profit off this illegal act of extortion. They want money, and more importantly, they want nuclear. Well, they want to be left alone from the shit imperialists that the US are, utterly insane. Trump then told Fox News that numerous countries are going to be helping us with the Strait of Hormuz. He said the UK is among those that were sending minesweepers to remove mines that they may have been placed in the water. And I'm pretty sure Downing Street today has said that they're not going to be getting involved in this, like, at all. I think yesterday when I wrote this, they hadn't publicly confirmed anything at that point. But I think what's happening is that the UK is working to figure out a practical plan to reopen the strait, and have also said that Lebanon should be involved in a ceasefire. Anyway, he continues, we have minesweepers there. Now we have highly sophisticated underwater minesweepers, which are the latest and the greatest, but we're also bringing in more traditional minesweepers. And so I understand is the UK and a couple of other countries are sending minesweepers, he added. Minesweepers. Said who? The UK hasn't confirmed this. Like, it's not happened. This is just Trump doing what Trump does best, putting out fictitious narratives and believing that if he says it enough, people will believe him. But I think he tries to believe his own lies too. That's why he says it out loud. He then doubles down in this Fox News interview saying, I could take Iran out in one day. I could have their entire energy, everything, every one of their plants, their electric generating plants, which is a big deal. This really goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, it's just messy, rubbish imperialism. And I'm not justifying imperialism. I don't want imperialism to be a thing, but I think past imperialists would laugh at the likes of Trump. But going on Truth Social and Fox News to announce your takeover on Iran is ridiculous. I mean, but he does treat geopolitics as though it's some reality TV show. Like, you can't just throw in some dramatic twist and threaten a blockade and, you know, bomb a school and then say, oh, I'm gonna block this and here's the cliffhanger. Like, it just doesn't work like that. I think when you start talking about a Strait of Hormuz, you're talking about a fifth of the world's oil supply. Like, you're discussing energy markets and inflation and supply chains, and then the consequences that land not on politicians but on ordinary people. Yeah, us trying to fill up our cars or pay their bills, or people just trying to live a normal civilian life. So yeah, and I think this is where the anti-establishment image really just is falling apart. I don't think anyone is arguing that he is anti-establishment at this point, but he is threatening global trade routes whilst being backed by billionaires and betting on this stuff. We can't forget that there were bets being made by him and his fat cat mates, placing bets so that they could get richer and line their own pockets. It's all just really embarrassing. But I also don't understand how blockading the strait is going to somehow push the Iranians into opening it. Like, where is the logic in that? In the updates The Guardian was giving, they said Robert Malley, a lead negotiator in the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, has commented in response to the red lines that the US reportedly detailed during yesterday's negotiations. These lines include ending all uranium enrichment, dismantling all major nuclear enrichment facilities, and fully opening the Strait of Hormuz, charging no tolls for passage. Malley responded to these demands on social media, writing, if these were actual red lines, they could have spared themselves the trip. Malley previously led the Middle East desk of the National Security Council under the Obama administration, becoming a key negotiator on the Iran nuclear deal. Human Majid, an Iranian-American journalist and political commentator, also responded to the red line list, saying there is no way that Iran will ever concede every one of these points, if it even considers any of them at all. So realistically, either Trump chooses to go back to talks and is willing to offer compromises, or goes back to war with all the consequences that will ensue. They could have saved themselves the trip. Martin, are we surprised that Iran said no thanks to the peace deals that the US were offering?
Absolutely not. I mean, listen, you can't bomb a country in an act of huge aggression and then expect any sort of good faith negotiations. But really, you can't expect good faith negotiations from the US either, because let's remember they were negotiating when they launched this war of aggression, and it's reached the point of complete and utter madness. I mean, I thought we got to that point last week when Donald Trump was talking about, annihilating an entire civilization with that genocidal rhetoric, which could only mean he was going to press his big red button in the Oval Office and launch nuclear weapons on Iran. But now he's talking about blockading Iran's blockade. So they're blockading a blockade. And Donald Trump keeps talking up the U.S. military and their navy and things like that. But this war has already shown that this war and sort of wars today have completely changed. And in Ukraine, Russia launching these very inexpensive drones, which Iran have been doing as well. And these drones could take out a multi-billion pound aircraft carrier with probably very little difficulty these days. So the art of war has completely changed, and the US have suffered a absolutely devastating strategic military defeat in Iran, and likewise Israel. And at the moment, they're desperately trying to find an off-ramp. And the worry is because Trump is a malignant narcissist, that he will not want to accept any kind of public defeat. So he'll kind of keep upping the rhetoric while simultaneously trying to find an off-ramp. But all the cards seem to be in Iran's hands. They control the Strait of Hormuz at the moment, and it's been going on for 45 days now. Trump knows, and the rest of the world knows, that we are getting through our oil and gas reserves incredibly quickly. We've already seen energy prices at petrol stations and food prices increase quite significantly. I think what's coming down the track is going to be even worse. So, all those cheerleaders in this country that were cheering on this war to begin with, who have now gone fairly quiet. I'm not sure there's anyone in this country still cheering on what the US has done, but they've gone quiet. Need to absolutely own their backing for this war, because we're all going to be paying the price for it. And Iran have basically been bolstered by it. I'm no fan of Iran's authoritarian theocratic regime at all. But they were attacked illegally by Israel and the US, and they have won the war. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and I do think if anyone is an internet troll, but then actually like a legitimate troll in real life who is so deranged and, like you said, a malignant narcissist. Like he's so Trump does what Trump wants to do, and he does it for his own interests. But there was news coming out today about how the Pope was responding to Trump's attacks. That he was saying, I've got it here, that the Pope was weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. If I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican.
I think he sent a photo of himself, like an AI photo of himself dressed up as Jesus.
He did.
This guy is totally unhinged.
So unhinged.
And he is the leader of a cult, essentially. The MAGA movement in the US is a cult. And he's still got a fair amount of support in the US, but his polling ratings are collapsing. Apparently, whilst all the negotiations were going on in Pakistan with JD Vance and co, he was at the UFC fight with Marco Rubio, watching the Ultimate Fighting Championships, and he got booed by the crowd. Normally he gets such a rapturous reception because that's his base. Dana White, who runs the UFC, is a massive supporter and donor to Donald Trump. But for the first time ever, Donald Trump appears, with a spotlight on him, and there was audible boos because people are having to pay more for their gas in America, and they will not people will not accept that at all. Only the most dedicated, cultish MAGA lot who could afford to kind of absorb the massive increases that are already happening and are going to be coming down the track even more will carry on supporting Donald Trump. I honestly think he's finished. This is an absolutely devastating mistake to go into war. He's obviously been convinced by Benjamin Netanyahu, who obviously has got his own motivations to launch a war in Iran. He's finally got his wish, and it's been absolutely devastating for Israel, because their Iron Dome has failed. Only about 20% of Iran's missiles that have been fired on Israel were intercepted. So another massive strategic failure by Benjamin Netanyahu. And when the ceasefire came in, a week or so ago, he launches a ridiculous psychotic knee-jerk reaction and launches hundreds of missiles on civilian areas of Lebanon. I mean, this guy is just evil personified, Benjamin Netanyahu. Families, children, civilians wiped out in an absolute instant in Lebanon, using the same tactics that they've used in Gaza over the last 3.5 years. I mean, these guys are an absolute danger to the world. Trump and Netanyahu are an absolute danger to the world. But yet none of the Western leaders are calling them out. You've heard a little bit from Keir Starmer today in the House of Commons, but, it's too little too late. Keir Starmer sat in the Oval Office and gave him that letter from the King to Donald Trump, inviting him for an unprecedented second state visit at massive cost to our country. The image of Keir Starmer scrabbling around on his knees, picking up Donald Trump's dropped papers. Sycophant is the word that comes to mind. So, it's too late for Keir Starmer to start attacking Donald Trump now. He cannot claim to say that the UK wasn't involved in this war because they opened up all the US air bases to fly bombing run after bombing run, and they weren't defensive missions as he claimed. B-52s, B-1 bombers flying out of RAF Fairford with 2,000-pound bombs that they didn't hide. They almost intentionally showing the world's media loading these bombs onto those aircraft. So the UK was involved, and Keir Starmer needs to own that as well.
I agree with you. And you make such a great point. Like, the condemnations have been so meager, so feeble, so weak. And if they weren't so weak in the way that they condemned these atrocious leaders, then maybe we might not be in this position now. But what worries me, and I think this is when I start spiraling into a bit of an existential crisis, that there's worse than Trump and Netanyahu. You've got Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who are even worse, I think, than Netanyahu. If God forbid they ever get into power, what would happen if they did, I think would be catastrophically worse. And that's even hard to imagine because what's happening at the moment is so bad that it's difficult to fathom. And then you've got Trump, who is so incredibly deranged that he does what he wants to do. Today, I want to threaten Greenland and I want to take them over. And I'm now going to make an AI picture of me being Jesus. But I'm also going to bomb loads of schoolgirls and then kidnap a president and then replace them the next day. All of these things are so utterly insane that it's hard for me to wrap my head around.
It does feel like we've entered some kind of Alice in Wonderland because you've got Trump basically threatening nuclear Armageddon on Iran. And then you've got, I mentioned this earlier about the BBC, you've got outlets like the BBC normalising Donald Trump threatening nuclear war. And we cannot allow that to happen. And I don't want to bang on about Keir Starmer too much, but Keir Starmer's failure to call out Donald Trump at the time of him threatening nuclear war on a sovereign nation just shows you yet again how little spine this man has got. He should have been calling that out straight away, condemning Donald Trump and trying to isolate him as much as possible. But instead, it was met with complete and utter silence, and yet we have to kind of wait on the whims and the wishes of a of a clearly maddening authoritarian orange person in Mar-a-Lago to see whether he's going to start a nuclear war.
I don't trust Starmer. You hit the nail on the head. He is spineless and slimy, and I have no shame in saying that. You can't trust someone who says release the sausages. Like, he's not a serious candidate. And I don't know, like, I saw this video of him recently. This is such a digression, but he just kept tripping over. Like so many videos of him tripping over, and I'm thinking this is a metaphor for your whole tenure at the moment during you being prime minister, that you have been consistently tripping over things, making U-turns here, weekly condemning Trump, weekly condemning Israel. It's tiresome, but yeah, completely agree with you, Martin. So let's move on before we get on to our third story. It's 2026 and we really want this year to be big for Turn Left, and we want to be more ambitious than last year and to really put ourselves on the map. Friday, I had the honor of being in the studio with the lights and the plants. That is real. We would like 2026 to be the year where we can have a studio and for our contributors to be paid for the work that we do. And we do this alongside our full-time jobs. So we want to be able to make amazing content for you guys. And your support over the years has not gone unnoticed. It's been amazing, and we're ready to take this to the next level. We rely on small donations. So if you want to be part of a media organisation that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. And there you can support us monthly on Patreon. There's another link for a one-time contribution, and you know this already, but you can also become a YouTube member for just 99p. But on to our third story. The Democrat Party has a new target. That's popular left-wing streamer Hassan Piker. The corporate Democrats, along with the Dem-backed media, recently have upped their attacks against him. Here's Jake Tapper's hit piece on CNN.
Now, Hassan Piker might not be a household name, at least among adults, but ask your kids. His new role as a midterm surrogate for some Democrats is proof that his political influence is expanding far beyond the streaming platform Twitch, where he has taken up residence. He is, without question, an online influencer with nearly 3 million followers. His rise as a prominent voice on the left is now driving a wedge between Democrats, and for good reason. Hassan Piker's past and present is checkered with controversial, if not outrageous, if not bigoted state comments like this one.
America deserved 9/11, dude. It. I'm saying it. We totally put it on ourselves, dude. Holy shit.
The ultra-Orthodox Jews leaving Israel, hilarious. Okay? If they serve in the military and then they get their untrained, inbred asses shipped into southern Lebanon, again, very funny.
You know, it's Hassan Piker calling Orthodox Jews inbred. Piker has also posted comments such as these, where he unequivocally sides with Hamas, calling them the lesser of two Israels compared to the lesser of two evils compared to the government of Israel. Piker has since apologized for his comments on 9/11, but he stood by the rest. He's accusing others of taking him out of context. In a Wall Street Journal op-ed, the leaders of the Democratic think tank Third Way write, quote, "Mr. Piker is anti-American, anti-women, anti-Western, and anti-Semitic. No Democrat should engage with him. All should seek to push him to the fringe where he belongs," unquote. Hassan Piker just recently become an issue in Michigan. It's home to a competitive three-way Democratic primary for governor. Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed, one of the three candidates and a former CNN commentator, announced that Piker will join him for 2 rallies in April. His opponents quickly seized on that, slamming the decision as unacceptable, calling Piker not somebody that you should be campaigning with at a moment when there's clearly a lot of pain and trauma across our state.
I mean, think about the absurdity of it for a second. You have a country that's facing spiraling housing costs. Public trust is being completely dismantled in the government. Grotesque wealth concentration, huge amounts of inequality, a healthcare system that bankrupts people for getting sick. And I do find this all a bit of a waste of time. You know, the Democrats going after a Twitch streamer to try and draw some morally bankrupt equivalence between Hassan Piker and far-right figures. I do think it's slightly unserious. Hassan Piker represents, I think, a kind of political energy that they can't seem to control. Whether that's an energy you agree with or not, it's still an energy that can't be contained or controlled. And I do think he speaks in a language that resonates with most people that are on the left. I think he does so outside of the institutional frameworks that the Democratic Party relies on to manage dissent. But, you know, the Democrats are not just failing. I think they're choosing to fail. They're choosing the comfort of managed decline over the risk of like genuine transformation. And I think they're choosing to police the boundaries of what discourse they desire rather than expand them. And I do think they're choosing again and again to kind of punch. They're not even punching down, they're punching left while the right consolidates power. But we've seen Trump, obviously, his power is like it's disintegrating in front of us. But the context of the 9/11 comments were blowback. The US has bombed and murdered their way around the world, toppled nations, including the Middle East. And it was Pike with a bit of dark humour explaining that the disastrous Western foreign policy will ultimately have consequences. In 2024, Kamala Harris lost against Donald Trump, and instead of the Democratic establishment learning the lesson, they've continued to act as corporate puppets and bent the knee to Israel. Like it or not, Hassan Piker is far more in touch with Democratic voters and all voters in the US more widely. It was also revealed last year that former Labour MP and head of Labour Together, Jonathan Ashworth, went with a team to help Harris's campaign, and it was a disaster. Martin, not everyone will agree with everything that Piker says. Some even may find his humour off-putting. But the corporate Democrats attacking Piker, calling him anti-Semitic, is a clear parallel of what's happening here.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, I'm a big fan of Hassan Piker. I've been subscribing to his Twitch stream and his YouTube channel for quite a few years, and that's because he speaks so convincingly. He is incredibly intelligent. He's incredibly articulate. He streams every day for at least 8 hours a day. He is incredibly prolific. So he's undoubtedly going to say things that can be taken out of context, or say things that he probably shouldn't have said. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he's incredibly popular. He's resonating with a lot of people, a lot of disenchanted young men as well, who might have otherwise have been scooped up by more far right podcasters like or hard right podcasters like the Joe Rogans or that like and get sort of consumed by the MAGA movement. So he's doing a lot of good work for the left, and it is so self-defeating for the Democratic establishment to try and demonize him like this. But it is not surprising at all, because the Democratic Party, even now Trump is absolutely tanking in the polls, they're doing even worse. They are not providing any opposition to Trump's complete and utter madness. They've not stood up against, the genocide that's been happening in Gaza or the illegal war in Iran that is going to cause a global economic meltdown. They've been absolutely useless. And now they're attacking Hassan Piker, who could and should be an asset to that party. We saw how much of an asset he was for the election of the New York mayor Mamdani. Hassan had Mamdani on his show, probably half a dozen times, in proper, decent, deep diving conversations where they explored, all manner of subjects, and that undoubtedly boosted Mamdani's campaign. And Hassan went to a rally in Michigan with a candidate for the midterm primaries, Abdul El Sayed, and apparently there were people queuing around the block. So, Sarah, when you mention that energy and that type of interest that can be generated by Hassan Piker, that's unmatched on the left in the US, and the Democrats should be tapping into that. I think the one encouraging thing is that politicians like AOC and Bernie Sanders understand that, and they have tapped into it, because I think they've also been on Hassan's show, and he's supported them in the past. But listen, all these smears about him being anti-Semitic, I know that that Hassan Piker is not anti-Semitic. I'm a Jewish person. I listen to his show. He is anti-Zionist. He is anti-Israel. He is anti-genocide. But because the Israel lobby is so powerful in America, with all this AIPAC money sloshing around their politics, and the leaders of the Democratic establishment, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, have all taken huge sums of money from the Israel lobby. That is why Hassan Piker is now being attacked and smeared, which has obviously very deep echoes of what has happened here. The problem is for AIPAC and the Israel lobby is that it feels like that ship has sailed now, but it is also quite a dangerous moment, because there's understandably a huge amount of anti-Israel feeling because of the way they have behaved over not just recent years but decades and decades, but that is now being leapt upon by genuine anti-Semites as well. And when smears are thrown at people like Hassan Piker, who absolutely aren't anti-Semitic, that kind of dilutes the very real anti-Semitism that is increasing in places like the US, and makes Jewish people much less safe. So that it really does need to stop.
Absolutely, and you pointed to something really important, and it's that when we're just brandishing or throwing around the term anti-Semitic, that's it then does take away from. There we go. Don't know what's happened there. Legitimate anti-Semitism, like that, I think is something that worries me. But I'm also glad that you made that distinction that people need to be making between being against Zionism and then like actual anti-Semitism. Like if you're against Zionism, it does not make you anti-Semitic. It just makes you against this Zionist state that's trying to implement the most egregious violence upon its neighbouring regions. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Great analysis, Martin. I think it's a great opportunity to go to your guys' comments. So we'll bring in our producer.
Hello.
Sure it's Chris.
Hello, everyone. Great show. I hope everyone's had a great time. Apologies for some of the audio stuff. Once again, we're back on our old system, and they have lots of automated stuff, and it's rubbish. But we're gonna get there. We're gonna get one day. We have a full-time studio, and we can deal with that. So let's go to the start off with obviously the super chats, as we usually do. Michael, as ever, gifted a turn of membership. Thank you so
Thanks, Michael.
much. And we've got a running theme now, Martin. You might not know, but there's something called Curtis Daly's Pen. Now, why is there an account called Curtis Daly's Pen? The last show I was on, I just had a pen in my hand. These are the type of people you're dealing with, Martin.
I did notice that in the chat, actually, and I was like,
what does that mean?
Going on? Yeah. So thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, Curtis Days Pen gave 5 to memberships. We still don't know who exactly that person is. Not really. Rachel Atwood says BB's pet toad in Budapest is going bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you. Not really, Rachel Atwood. Let's look at your comments. Specs Being Farmer says, this is on obviously the first story, Lowe is the most Twitter-brained MP in the whole of the UK. That is so true. I mean, typically younger people will have that real Twitter online lingo. And Rupert Lowe is very into it because that's his entire movement, isn't it?
Yeah.
He can get likes and shares and clicks and stuff. You often see it when he replies to someone. He always ratios other politicians. And now Zach Polanski does that too, but I think there's a difference because Zach Polanski is also on the ground. I mean, like the Green Party's got over 200,000 members. And by the way, before people say, "Oh, Restore have got 120,000 members," they still don't have a membership portal. You
Yeah,
go
they
on the
don't.
website, you cannot sign up to be a member. You can only donate for as little as £20 a year. So basically, it's 120,000 donors that could be worldwide across the entire world. They do not have a membership system, so they have 0 members.
And like we need to also understand why Lowe tweets as much as he does and why he has lengthy posts, and it's because he gets paid. Like he's a great little grifter who gets paid off of Twitter to be able to tweet as much as he does. Like it's just another grift, really.
It's also important to note that, you know, again, he's trying to frame himself like Farage did as a man of the people and the working class, when he is a multi-millionaire. I think at the last count he was worth about £30 million. Used to own Southampton Football Club. So man of the people, he is not.
Southampton haven't lost a game in 12 matches. I don't know what's going on there. I'm sure he's not. I don't know what's happened.
But it's not just about the man of the people thing. It's and this is a feature from the right. It's the constant acting like a victim, and he does it right. He can't, like, it's all about victim politics for them. It's the white English race are being replaced. Oh, this, and it's really like, it's grievance politics. And actually, if you see that Rupert Lowe, the way he tweets, he loves playing the victim. Let's go to another comment. Paul Old Spice. Restore allows open neo-Nazi and Holocaust deniers like Steve Law to be members. All the headbangers are joining up as they are barred from Reform. Reform blocks ex-MP from joining. So, yeah, Steve Law is quite literally denied the Holocaust as like a neo-Nazi, and had his Twitter account banned under Jack Dorsey. Jack Dorsey isn't, some left-winger. He was just some billionaire, centrist, liberal, whatever, probably apolitical. But under Elon Musk, you had a plethora of literal Nazi accounts being allowed back on, and Steve Law is apparently a member. Again, you can't be a member of Restore, but he's a supporter of Restore, and that says it all, doesn't it?
It does. And those sorts of figures you have to be afraid of. Like if you've got people who are denying one of the most like prolific things that have happened in history, so well documented. This is something that's so documented, and you have people literally going there, but I don't think it happened. Like those are dangerous individuals who like spit in the face of history and tell you that what you're reading is fake. Like, oh my God, how hard is your tinfoil hat on? Like it must be on so tight. It's ridiculous.
I think one of the biggest worries is whether the street movement under Tommy Robinson, which he's currently running under the Unite the Kingdom banner, would unite with a political party like Restore Britain and kind of join forces, as it were, because as of yet that hasn't happened, because Nigel Farage has not welcomed Tommy Robinson with open arms. So whether Tommy Robinson's fascist street movement would unite behind Rupert Lowe's party is one of the bigger worries. I think as the kind of the far right continues to grow in this country.
And I was going to ask this actually, and you sort of alluded to it, because Nigel Farage has distanced himself from Tommy Robinson, and obviously Paul Old Spice says how Reform will block ex-BNP people from joining. Obviously, Restore is to the right of Reform. I don't see those in the same. But I do think, and a part of the attacks from Restore to Reform is that they're essentially not pro ethnic minority, but they've fielded candidates who are Muslim, who are people of colour. And the worrying thing here is that Restore is moving it over into a window where they can literally look at point to Reform and say, oh, well, they're just like the left-wing establishment because they're also lovers of Muslims and people of colour. Of course, we see it all the time in politics. Being part of a minority group, being a Muslim, doesn't necessarily mean you are a leftist or whatever. I mean, Layla Cunningham's is a Muslim, for example. But I feel like with Restore in the political picture, they're dragging the debate to the right, making Reform look moderate. And part of the criticism is saying, well, you've got these people from ethnic backgrounds, therefore Reform aren't radical. Whereas actually, I do think reform are pretty radical, but it's being drowned out by the noise of restore.
Yeah. Go ahead, Martin. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And Sarah did mention that Overton window shifting at the beginning of the show, and I think if Restore do drag the Overton window further to the far right, then and start gaining votes and winning council seats and even MPs, God forbid, Reform will react and swing even further to the right as well. So that there has to be a coordinated pushback to this from the left. I think that Together march that happened a few weeks ago was incredibly positive. Trade unions, migrant rights organisations, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, all joining forces for that massive march. So we really do need more of that on the streets to push back against this very dangerous rhetoric that Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe are pushing forward.
When you see, again, I don't think Restore are going to have any kind of electoral impact, right? But it doesn't always mean about winning seats. It's about winning the debate. And I do worry, obviously, again, the Overton window moving to the right. But some people seem to think this is kind of good because it could be a split in support from the right. I want to ask you, do you think that's good? The inclusion of people like Rupert Lowe is someone who can peel support away from reform? Or do you think actually it kind of legitimizes reform insofar that, look, reform can only win a majority if they're seen as a bit more moderate? Like Restore could never win a general election because people are not as radical as Rupert Lowe. Yes, I would say the average opinion is teetering on anti-immigration. Certainly people are like, they want to see lower immigration. And the corporate media, especially with Talk TV and GB News, people are a bit more conservative on some things, including immigration. But I wouldn't argue that they're ethno-nationalists. So do you think the inclusion of someone like Restore and Rupert Lowe makes reform look more moderate, which is actually helps reform? Or again, do you think actually this splits the support and only helps the left?
I mean, I think it probably does make them look more moderate, but I don't think that's just Restore Britain that has done that. I mentioned earlier that the establishment media have normalised Nigel Farage and over the course of decades, made him, one of the most familiar political faces in the UK. So that political normalisation has happened with Nigel Farage and Reform UK already, but I also do think it will split some of the Reform vote as well. I did mention that it might have a more positive impact. I'm not sure that was the right wording when I used that, but I think if there are various factions of the extreme right fighting like rats in a sack, that is a positive thing for the left because they will be distracted by that fight. They'll be spending energy on it, and it will mean their vote ultimately gets split if they stand in elections together.
Yeah, I mean, there are two things to contend here, right? And both I think are kind of true. I suppose it remains to be seen which one is more true than the other. Yori Gibson says Starver and Lammy got frick by US military on the subject of the UK providing of F-35 fighter jets parts today. The Pentagon did an audit on the parts in the supply chain and it's not looking good for... I didn't see the second half of the comment, but I saw this comment and it reminds me of, one, the rhetoric around how Labour are not part of this war, but Martin earlier correctly pointed out they are very much part of this war. And they have sent fighter jets already. And of course, when it comes to the military bases. So we're being gaslit in real time when you've got people on the Labour side saying, we're not following Trump into this war. All right, it's not a Tony Blair, George Bush style kind of aggression from the UK, but allowing our military bases at least still means we're part of this war in a more stealth way.
Yeah, I mean, I follow this excellent journalist called Matt Kennard.
Yes,
and
brilliant.
he's been tracking, expertly what's been flying in and out of RAF I'm going to pronounce this wrong. The airbase on Cyprus, Akrotiri, I think it is. But even today, even this week, he mapped a flight that took off there and went flying around Lebanon at the very same time that Israel were about to launch their bombing raid on Beirut and surrounding towns and cities that caused mass devastation and civilian casualties. So, the UK are absolutely very much involved in these wars in the Middle East, and Keir Starmer cannot deny that fact at all.
100%. But yeah, much love to Matt Kennard. He does fantastic work, and I'm a big fan of Declassified UK. They really, especially on foreign policy, it's obviously what they mostly focus their stuff on, do some incredible journalistic work. Again, I've always appreciated this stuff, looking into the Israeli lobby, specifically with the Labour Party, and looking at Keir Starmer's cabinet. So much love to our friends at Declassified. Not really Rachel Atwood says, Pedro Sanchez is the leader of the free world now. Of course, you saw recently that Benjamin Netanyahu kind of threatened Spain. I don't know what he means by that, but he kind of said, well, Spain are standing with our with Hamas and terrorists, because obviously Pedro Sanchez is dead, stood up to Israel. I mean, look, Pedro Sanchez, I don't know if he's some radical leftist or not, but I'm certainly impressed the way he's conducted himself on Israel.
Yeah, I mean, before he took that stance, I think his party was actually polling quite badly in Spain. But he's took a very firm stance on the US not using air bases in Spain or even using their airspace, and has been bold enough to call out Donald Trump and call out Benjamin Netanyahu. And since then, his popularity has absolutely soared in Spain. So, again, this kind of links up to how ridiculous the US Democrats are in kind of rejecting people like Hassan Piker and people's concerns around the influence that Israel has in US politics, and so many of the global issues that are happening around our world today in terms of the wars and the genocides that are happening. Anti-Israel sentiment is massive in the US now, and the Democratic US establishment just don't seem to be aware of that at all, and are still living in a world that doesn't exist.
Yeah, and then I think
people don't want to be in war.
Yeah, I mean, it's so simple. People don't like war. It's like doing things that people like makes you popular. It's such a radical idea, and yet the Labour Party won't do it. The Democrats won't do it. I mean, my argument with the Democrats is that it's not even about winning for them. They would rather lose and keep their corporate donors than win an election, because for them, it's for a lot of people in the Democrat Party, that's their career, right? Schmoozing with these big corporate donors. That's their life in a way. So they're like, well, to be fair, even if we're in opposition, I've got a cushy job. I don't want to rock the boat. So, I mean, appealing to the Democrats and the Labour Party, saying you're going to lose support if you do this, I feel like they don't care. I mean, if we said to the Labour Party, if you cut corporate ties and were more pro-worker and stood against genocide, you get support, and they would. Their polling would, I'm sure would go up, although I think there's a lot of people, myself included, are so disgusted with them that it's too late for them. But there'll be other people out there who might go back and support them, like Andy Burnham, for example. Again, he's not a radical, but I think Labour probably would have won Gorton Denson with him. But Labour will then have to change the internal machinations, have to change who they hang around with. Their entire gravy train will be disrupted, and that is not something they want to do. Again, not Rachel also said Stephen Miller is more evil than Trump as a person. I don't know what you guys think about this. I agree, because I think Stephen Miller is the one who's the more ideological. Trump is first, I think he's got dementia, so I don't know if I think he knows where he's at. But Trump cares about money and the grift and power. Stephen Miller is a white nationalist.
Yeah, and I do think Stephen Miller is more dangerous. It's just like I do think that Gavir and Smotrich are quite super dangerous. Like when I was making that comparison earlier, I was like, I think there are actually worse people than Trump and Netanyahu, despite the fact that they have set the precedent for like evilness in the 21st century. Like, it is still very much a frightening prospect that there are people who are deeply rooted in their ideologies, that they would be willing to go to insane lengths to ensure that those things happen, or to maintain not even the status quo, but like to go beyond what is imaginable at the moment. So yeah,
100%. I mean, and again, the kind of the lack of the Labour government calling out the new death sentence law that Israel has just passed as well. I think there was a very kind of quiet murmuring against it by Yvette Cooper, but this is just absolutely abhorrent that you've got people like Ben Gvir, this fascist tyrant in charge of security over there in prisons, celebrating. The Knesset there passing capital punishment law for Palestinian detainees, some of whom have never even had a fair trial and have basically been abducted from the occupied Palestinian territories or places like Gaza, and they're in the Knesset, they're cracking open champagne with their noose pin badges on. Israel is a deeply sick society, and the fact that someone like that can be elected to high office just really goes to show it.
Yeah, I was so disgusted. I mean, I'm disgusted from the Labour Party all the time, but so disgusted in their reaction or lack of reaction when it came to Ben Gvir's literal noose. I mean, he had a room to hang.
Where are the sanctions? Where are the sanctions?
Absolutely.
This is what would hurt Israel, and the UK just refuses, like point blank, to issue any kind of financial sanctions on Israel at all. They might issue kind of a strongly or mildly worded statement, but that means absolutely nothing. And throughout all of this, throughout all the genocide that's been happening in Gaza and the illegal war in Lebanon and Iran and incursions into Syria, literally every single country in that region, the UK has refused point blank to issue a single sanction, and you've still got politicians like Rachel Reeves turning up at the Labour Friends of Israel lunches, celebrating that relationship. As a Jewish person, it really does sicken me, because they, we mentioned it earlier about the conflation with anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. They hide behind these anti-Semitism smears to basically allow Israel to continue with total and utter impunity, and it's just so terrible.
Final comment from Edward Sexby says, Martin is a great guest, by the way, forgot to say that earlier. We all agree. We absolutely all agree.
He is.
Thank you so much
to be on.
Yes.
Absolutely brilliant.
I'm going to hand back now to you, Sarah, but thank you, everyone. Let's go back to you.
Amazing. Wait, where's Martin? I need to thank Martin for being here. Martin, thank you so much for being here and for your insightful analysis. Honestly, I'm really grateful I got to share the space with you on this wonderful Monday. So
Thanks.
Thank you.
You've let me rock my FC United and Manchester shirt on live YouTube as well. We're going for the Premier League now. No, we're not. We're about to win the Northern Premier League, which this is my non-league team, and one of the anti-establishment football clubs that I've supported for a very long time.
Oh, I love that so much. Well, I'm rooting for them. I'm rooting for them. I don't really watch football, but I do keep up to date with it just to, poke jokes at my dad or other fans that I just find annoying, but not you. I don't find you annoying. I want you guys in the Premier League. That's what I want. But thanks so much.
We're still way off there. But yeah, thanks so much. It's been absolutely great. It's been great joining you this evening.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you who've tuned in. And honestly, Mars is absolutely brilliant. So thank you to him for joining me today. I mean, remember we go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7:30. You've been watching Normal Ireland Live. I'm Sarah Dallal, and I'll see you guys next time.